Imagine this. You walk into your workplace with your briefcase and cup of coffee. You begin to sit down at your desk and soon realize that those fellow coworkers around you are also enjoying this delicious beverage. Some of it may be brewed at home, some others may be enjoying Starbucks. You soon think to yourself, why is everybody drinking coffee? Well, during this presentation, I hope you'll become more informed about this delicious beverage. Since the 16th century, coffee has become one of the most favorable beverages in the Americas. Now, before jumping right in, let's take a look at the history of coffee and how it came to be. According to the National Coffee Association, in 2016, coffee comes from the plant café. There's about 25 to 100 different types of species. However, 2 of them are used in the making of coffee. The first, Arabic, is known to be from Ethiopia. It's said to be fine, mild in taste, represents about 70% of the market. The bean is flat, elongated, and is said to have less caffeine than most of the other coffee beans. It needs to be grown between 2,000 and 6,000 feet above sea level, in between temperatures of 59 degrees and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. It also needs to have roughly about 60 inches of rainfall. The second, Robusta, is from Central and Western Africa, Southeast Asia, and Brazil. This represents the other 30% of the US market. This type of bean is used in coffee blends and instant coffees. The bean is rounded, more smaller when compared to the Arabic bean. However, on the other hand, it's more hardier and easier to cultivate. It can be grown in warmer climates and lower temperatures. The history of coffee is quite still unknown, but it's said to be founded by a gentleman named Kaldi in Ethiopia around the 13th century. According to PBS, in 2006, Kaldi was a sheep herder and began to notice that after eating a red fruit from a berry, that his sheep began to roam with quite some energy. Kaldi became curious, so he tried the bean himself and began to experience the same symptoms. From a distance, a monk experienced this and also became curious. So this monk grabbed several of the berries, took it back to the village, and it experimented with these beans. And of course, they began to see all this high energy. Since then, coffee has moved from Ethiopia to Russia, Brazil, but it didn't make it into the Americas until about the 18th century. The big event that occurred in America that brought coffee here was the Boston Tea Party in 1773. During that time, many of the colonists switched from tea to coffee. After that, coffee became a huge commodity and people began to look for several ways to make a profit. In 1864, brothers John and Charles Arbuckle from Pittsburgh began to sell coffee beans in bags for £1. This was very popular among the Western cowboys. Because of this, coffee quickly moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. Soon after, a gentleman named James Folgers began to sell coffee to the gold miners in California. It wasn't until long after that when we began to see a lot of the major coffee makers today, such as Folgers, Hills Brothers, and Maxwell House, come to be. Now, aside from the history, coffee has changed drastically in America. According to the website Go Coffee Go, Alfred Peet is known as the godfather of the specialty coffees. Alfred Peet, in 1966, opened up one of the first coffee houses that actually began to sell specialty coffees. Prior to this, the coffee shops only sold coffee beans. In 1971, 3 of his business partners, Jerry Baldwin, Zev Seigel, and Gordon Bowker, left his business, left California, and moved up to Seattle, Washington. Here they formed Starbucks. They only sold one thing at this time, and that was freshly roasted coffee beans. The next year, in 1972, we began to see the first automatic drip coffee maker invented by Mr. Coffee. 15 years later, in 1987, a New York man named Howard Schultz bought out Starbucks for $3.8 billion. Once he earned the rights to the name, he renamed all of his coffee shops in New York Starbucks to get the name out there, and began to open up at least one Starbucks throughout America each year until the early 2000s. This became one of the springboards of the coffee. In 2006, specialty coffees started to make up 40% of the marketplace. And as you can see from this, it is from the Gallup in 2015 that roughly 24% of the people drink regular coffee. The rest is specialty coffee, such as 12% cappuccino, 8% espresso, 8% Americano, 5% lattes. In 2009, it's estimated that Americans consumed 400 billion cups of coffee each year. During the same year, coffee became the second leading export, closely to follow oil. According to the National Coffee Association, again of 2016, coffee used to be brewed at home. It used to be considered kind of a tradition for families to do their own thing. However, with the new generation and the millennials, this has kind of changed, and people began to drink coffee outside of the house. And as you can see here, again from a survey from Gallup in 2015, only 43% of people will brew coffee at home. 26% will purchase coffee from a large chain such as Starbucks, and 22% will purchase it from a small coffee house from a local store. The same survey from Gallup estimated that in 2005, United States citizens drank about 2.7 cups of coffee a day. Those who didn't hit 2.7, the cups of coffee per day, estimated that about 2/3 of all Americans had at least 1 cup. Surprisingly, this hasn't changed much since 1999. A similar survey stated in 1999 that Americans drank about 3 cups of coffee per day. In conclusion, I have informed you about the types of coffee, the history of coffee, and the impact on the United States. I hope this has helped inform you more on the impact of coffee and how it has affected the world today, and now you can see why coffee is one of America's most favorable beverages.